have for today, we're going to hear some opening remarks from Justin Iverson, who's the groundwater section with the Water Resources Department. And we are also going to hear some remarks from Melissa Downs from Department of Ecology. And we will also be introduced to the groundwater study team members. We're going to hear from Amanda Garcia at the USGS about what is a groundwater study, give us like a high level overview. And then if we're successful, fingers crossed, we're going to go to breakout rooms and answer one question in the breakout rooms. We've got a facilitator for each room as well as a groundwater study team member. Then we'll come back all together in the big Zoom room and recap those breakout discussions. Then you're going to hear a little bit from me about what is a public participation plan and just our thinking around how to involve you all as the groundwater study unfolds. Then we'll go back into breakout rooms for another question, come back as a group to recap, and then we'll recap the whole meeting and talk about next steps. So this is going to be, there's a lot of ground to cover, and it's new technology, and we have a lot of people in the room. So we're going to do the best that we can, and just ask for your patience with all of us. Let's see here. Yeah, we've got 100 people in the room. That's awesome. I'm really excited that you all are spending your afternoon with us. So thank you so much for being here. I also wanted to let you know that we are recording, and anything that you put in the chat box is public record. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that. And I am going to now turn things over to Justin Iverson. Justin, if you could unmute yourself and join the group.
Okay, sure thing. So I'll echo Harmony. Thanks, folks, for being here and taking some time out of your afternoon to be with us. Really happy to have a good group of folks join us virtually. So I was asked to talk about why a groundwater study? Why are we here? And I think as many people in the basin are well aware, there have been some changes, at least I'll just be speaking for, I guess, the Oregon side, though maybe what I'll say will cross over to Washington, and we'll hear from Melissa Downs as well. But I'll just say on the Oregon side, certainly there have been some changes in water management the last couple decades, driven predominantly by ESA concerns. And folks in the basin have responded to that in a number of ways. And one of those is that we've seen more dependence on groundwater as surface water isn't as available. We have a deep basalt groundwater system that many of you probably joined us for public meetings a couple years ago that we were starting to address. Again, we've seen some increased use there. We've seen water levels start to decline. We've seen some senior users not getting their usual and accustomed amount. So, use of that deep basalt resource in excess in some places of what's there and available to use sustainably. And then we've got an alluvial system in between the two, between the basalt and the stream system that kind of connects them all together, and that's been both used for irrigation. It's been recharged, a lot of tinkering with that system. And so what we're hoping to do with this study is to essentially form a foundational understanding of how all three of those components interconnect. And I should say more than those three components, also the precipitation and the use and the evaporation. So we're really, we're calling this a groundwater basin study, but we're really looking at groundwater as part of the hydrologic cycle, and we're going to be looking at kind of how water cycles through the system. We're real happy to be able to do so in coordination with the Washington Department of Ecology and with USGS offices on both sides of the state border. So again, in a number of public meetings we held a couple of years ago, we heard, or at least I heard about every meeting, what about Washington? And I've heard that Washington folks ask the same thing. What about Oregon? So we're real happy that we've been able to pull together a bi-state team to take a look at the whole Walla Walla hydrologic basin and understand what's happening through the border, if you will. And also I want to acknowledge that we're in a real fortunate position in as far as data collection goes, because there's been a lot of folks looking at these systems and collecting data there for a number of years. Certainly the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation have been collecting a lot of data. The Walla Walla Basin Watershed Council, similarly, as well as a number of municipalities and individual users that have been collecting and reporting their water use data. So that's a great head start on the study that we have. I just want to, I guess I want to take one moment to say what the groundwater study is not. So we're focused on building a shared scientific foundation. This groundwater study won't address policy or management questions. Again, this will be kind of foundational information that will help us make the best policy and management decisions that we can. And we want to make those based on a shared understanding of how the system works and how decisions that we might make might lead to impacts throughout the system. So that's the purpose, is to really get an overarching basin-wide picture of how the hydrology works in the basin. And by hydrology, while we're looking at the whole hydrologic system, we really are focused on groundwater and how groundwater interacts with the various components of the hydrologic cycle. So with that, I want to say thanks again to folks for being here. Really appreciate the turnout, and I'll invite Melissa Downs to follow up and give some thoughts from the Washington side of the border.
Justin, before you transition, I'm not going to let you off hook. You have to tell us your word associations for groundwater and science, and tell us what your superpower would be.
Sure. Okay, my one word association is cycle, or water cycle, if I can have a hyphenated one, that I associate with groundwater. Word I associate with science is curiosity. And as far as a random hobby I could turn into a superpower, this time of year, I've got really good pattern recognition and can spot mushrooms under forest duff from long distances. So, thank you.
All right, Melissa, floor is yours.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Melissa Downs. I'm a hydrogeologist with the Washington State Department of Ecology in a section known as the Office of Columbia River. I'm physically located in Yakima, Washington. I'll get my housekeeping out of the way so Harmony doesn't have to call on me later. About the word I associate with groundwater is pore space, probably because it plays a big role in infiltration rates and flow patterns and hydraulic properties. And my word I associate with science is evidence. And my superpower is not so much a hobby, but a skill that I wish to acquire, which is getting from place to place faster. So I'd like to get a taxi driver superpower somehow, some way. So thanks for that introduction, Justin. I think we all depend on groundwater for something that overlaps with our daily lives, whether it's drinking water, irrigation use, livestock use, industrial manufacturing, and the list kind of goes on. And that's why we're all here talking about this important topic tonight. Groundwater is such a natural, or is an important natural resource, and is typically more difficult to quantify because it is below ground surface compared to its surface water counterpart. And it can vary with climate, with precipitation, based on groundwater withdrawals, overlying land use, and just the very rock or soil and the pore space, there's that word, that it flows through. So just knowing how much groundwater is being pumped can be challenging, and you layer that with how much recharge is occurring, 2 different state groundwater codes overlapping, and some complex hydrogeology. And it's no wonder that we're finding ourselves in this place of wanting more science around groundwater. I see a lot of familiar names and faces in the crowd tonight that overlap with the Walla Walla Bi-State Flow Study and or the Walla Walla Water 2050 process that ecology has kicked off. And we frequently hear a lot about groundwater data gaps during these other forums. Many folks ask us questions that we cannot answer today, such as how can the basin support new groundwater uses? And does shallow aquifer recharge help maintain groundwater levels? And before we can assess questions like these down the road, we need to characterize and quantify groundwater systems within the entire basin on both sides of the border, and quantify existing demands and locate recharge and discharge points. But I don't want to steal the USGS thunder. But this is certainly where they come in as our partners, and we'll hear more from them shortly. So we are trying to build a collaborative partnership between the state of Washington, the state of Oregon, the Umatilla tribe, the US Geological Survey, and you all, the public, to help build this groundwater study. So let's not lose sight of why we're here and gathered tonight to talk about groundwater in the Walla Walla Basin. It's very exciting to be at this stage and building the foundation for conjunctive water management that Justin spoke of in this entire bi-state basin. And I think our goal is to arm water managers and water users with groundwater science to help inform and answer those questions that we have. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We're here to help inform you, and we ask that you all be engaged in the process going forward over the next couple hours.
Thanks, Melissa.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, obviously we want to hear your feedback as we go forward with this study. We want to make sure that all the data gaps and information come to light so that we can build this study the best that we can. I'm going to introduce the ecology team. You can see it up on your screen. Melissa Downs already introduced herself. So won't need to go over that information, but we also have myself. I'm working with Ecology's Office of Columbia River out of Spokane. I'm a hydrogeologist. The word I relate to groundwater would be finite. It's important to remember that it's not an infinite source, and it's our job to use it wisely. Science, the word I would associate there is foundational, and I think Melissa and Justin kind of used that terminology in their intro. You know, we want to make good policy decisions and water management decisions on a strong foundation. And that's where this groundwater study can be helpful. Superpower, convincing my kids to eat their vegetables. I mean, that can be challenging. I'm sure folks can relate. So it'd just be a lot easier if I had some superpower instead of, you know, having to work too hard at it. And then the other two folks, part of our team here on the screen, we've got Patrick Cabbage, who is a hydrogeologist and technical unit supervisor out of Spokane with our water resources program. And his word association with groundwater is stewardship. And his word association with science is helpful. And his superpower is making pizzas. And, you know, I'm going to use this platform to ask Patrick, how come I have not tasted any of these pizzas? Maybe we can talk about this offline.
You just haven't tasted them yet, Scott. Not yet.
Great. And Chris Beard, he's also a hydrogeologist with our water resources program out of Spokane. And the word associated with groundwater is precious. The word he associates with science is nerd. And I'm somewhat offended, Chris, with that word choice. But I do appreciate the, what's that?
I'm a scientist too, though.
Yeah. And then the superpower is paint scenes that come to life that you could live in. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a pretty unique superpower. And that's our ecology team. And I will mention that there are some folks that didn't make the slide. We have a full team supporting this effort. And I want to mention Jamie Short as the Water Resources Section Manager in Spokane, Brooke Beeler as the Eastern Region Regional Director out of Spokane, and a few other folks that are sprinkled about within other programs within ecology. So thanks to everyone involved.
Well, let's see. So I'm Jen Woody. This slide is showing 5 of us at Water Resources, scientist folks who will be working on this study. Joe Kemper and I think we've met some of you folks before. We're both groundwater scientists, do a lot of data collection in the area. For me and I guess I didn't do all the things, Harmony. I just did superpowers, sorry. So my superpower I chose was, I have long arms and I can reach far, but I would love to extend that so that they were elastic and I could reach even farther, vault high buildings, that sort of thing. Joe, he said he wanted to turn stale pastries into out of the oven fresh ones. And then the other 3 folks on here are surface water scientists. So Jonathan LaMarche, he said seeing water move underground would be a fabulous superpower. Jordan Beamer is the one in the middle, another hydrologist. He would like to defy the laws of physics to create more water. And then Kara Morris, also hydrographer, likes to hang out with her dog family, and she said she'd like to shapeshift into a dog. So that's us.
Hi, so we've got folks from Oregon and Washington USGS offices that are going to be participating in this study. From the Oregon team, I'm Amanda Garcia. I'm a hydrologist in the Portland office, and my superpower would be to create food from other matter. I love to cook, and with COVID happening right now, I really just don't want to go to the grocery store. It's become kind of a pain in the butt, so if I could just have ready-made healthy meals appear, then that would make life much easier. Project staff are Hank Johnson. He's a hydrologist with USGS as well in Oregon and Portland. And his superpower is the ability to speak and understand all living languages, all living and dead languages. And Steve Gingrich, he's a research hydrologist also in Portland, and his superpower is the power to see underground. Okay, our Washington counterparts are Andy Long. He's a groundwater specialist in Washington in the Tacoma office. And his superpower would be the ability to restore structures to their optimal condition. Wendy Welch, also in the Tacoma office. She is a hydrologist and GIS coordinator. And her superpower would be to be a time turner like Hermione Granger in Harry Potter. She wants to have the ability to be in 2 places at once. Liesl Fasser, she is a technician and database manager out of the Kennewick office, and her superpower would be time manipulation. Jeff Wiles, also out of the Kennewick office, he's the field office chief, and his superpower would be to fly like an eagle. And Sarah Dunn, she's a geologist out of the Tacoma office, and her superpower would be super speed reading, so she can read all of those novels that have stacked up on her bedside table. So that's it for the USGS folks. As Harmony mentioned, this study or this presentation is like a high-level overview of a typical groundwater study that the USGS does, and we're going to provide some information on our reasoning for doing the study, what some of our goals are, and then show our plan for the current study. So a typical USGS study of groundwater is basically a scientific investigation of the whole groundwater system. It's based on data collected either within the basin or within the same region. And our studies are unbiased, objective studies that can be used to inform both policy and water management decisions. So one common type of groundwater study that the USGS does is water availability studies. With these studies, we can look at the inflows, groundwater inflow through or recharge, outflow through discharge. We look at the flow directions, so how does groundwater move from recharge to discharge points. These studies also often take into account the groundwater level trends, long and short-term trends. And so another type of study is water quality study. We do these to look at basic drinking water quality for public consumption, also looking at potentially like contaminant plumes that might be moving towards a public water supply or something along those lines. And we also use water quality, or more specifically, water chemistry data to provide a better understanding of groundwater flow systems as well. And then another common type is simulation tools, or you may be familiar with groundwater flow models that we use, where we synthesize a lot of the water availability and water quality data into a numerical model that can provide information to explain how the current system is behaving. And then we can also look and see what any perturbation to the groundwater system would result in. So if you increased or decreased pumping in a certain area, or if rainfall started to decrease, or there was a decrease in recharge, what might happen with the groundwater flow system. Okay, next slide. So a groundwater study work plan is a document that we put together. We're currently working on the Walla one right now. And it defines the purpose of the study, the scope, and objectives that we'd like to meet in order to perform the larger investigation. And within the work plan, we have detailed tasks that we're going to use to achieve those objectives. We have a timeline that describes how much time it's going to take to do each one of the tasks, a budget that's associated with those as well, so we can know what the cost is to achieve all of the objectives within our work plan, and then deliverables as well. Those deliverables include reports and data releases for any data that we collect during the study, and this is all made publicly available at the end of the study. All right, so some examples of groundwater studies that we've done in Oregon are shown here. There's 12 different studies. These all focus on, have a groundwater flow model focus, where that was done within the larger basin. Most of the studies have occurred along the Columbia River corridor, but there's also some that have happened within the central part of Oregon. We're currently working on a study in Harney Basin. And then I included Walla outline up in the Northeast, just to show that there's been a large regional study that was done that encompassed the Walla Basin, and then some smaller basin studies that were done in some adjacent basins to Walla. Within the state of Oregon, there's been numerous groundwater studies. The pink represents groundwater studies that include a groundwater flow model, and the blue represents studies that haven't. And again, in the southeast part of the state, there's quite a few studies that have been done that encompass either the Walla Basin or the basins surrounding. Okay, so why do we need a study within the basin? Well, not only is it a bi-state basin that spans both Oregon and Washington, but it's a complex hydrogeologic system. There's multiple aquifers that interact with each other and also interact with the surface water system. There's been long-term groundwater level declines that have been documented since the 1940s. And there's also been insufficient in-stream flows despite current efforts to mitigate that. So there's a need for a larger basin scale understanding so that the resources within the basin can be protected and managed so that everyone can have access to water. And there's a long history of data collection and studies that have been done across the basin, but a lot of these focus on different areas or different aquifers within the basin. So by doing this larger full basin scale groundwater study, we can leverage all this data and these previous studies that have been done to pull all the data, the information together to create a more holistic understanding of the flow system. Okay, so what's the value of this groundwater study? Well, there's a lot of competing interests for groundwater within the basin. There's water use for human consumption, water use for agriculture, water use to protect fish habitat, among other users. And how the study will be used is to inform future planning and water management decisions at the basin level so we can move forward. So the goals of this study are to work with water resource agencies and stakeholders, both in Oregon and Washington. We'd like to improve understanding of the groundwater flow system and describe some different parts of the system, including the extent of groundwater within the different aquifers and the connectivity both within a single aquifer and between aquifers. To look at the impacts of pumping on groundwater levels and how these potentially affect surface water, and then also looking at the natural interactions between groundwater and surface water within the basin and how water use is affecting those. And last, we'd like to develop a tool to simulate the groundwater system so that we can understand the effects of the current stresses on the groundwater system and look at future water management scenarios. So some questions that we'll be answering with the groundwater study include how much water enters the basin is groundwater recharge, how much water leaves the basin is discharge. Most of the discharge in the basin is discharge of the groundwater to streams, and most of the recharge occurs from precipitation or from infiltration of stream flow. We'd also like to look at water level declines, how those might progress within the future if current water use continues or if water use practices change. How might water level declines be managed in the future? And how does pumping affect stream flow within the basin? And last, to what degree are different parts of the basin hydraulically connected? If you have pumping that happens, say, in the Tushi area, are you going to see those effects in Oregon, just south of the Walla River? So we hope to answer these questions. So once the study is underway, I wanted to define the roles between USGS and the cooperating agencies, which are OWRD and Washington Department of Ecology. So USGS will be leading the collaborative study. That's going to include data collection and interpretations. And then we'll be the lead author on the peer-reviewed reports that'll come out of the study. And then the cooperating agencies will be assisting in data collection and interpretations that are made within the study, and they'll also be contributing to the study reports. So here's an outline of the tasks that we plan to take care of during the study. Those include compiling and reviewing the data and the literature that's out there. So as mentioned by Justin and Melissa before, there's been a ton of data that's been collected within the basin and several studies that have occurred in different parts. So we're going to pull all this data together and use that to inform where we need additional data, and we can fill those data gaps by collecting new data. There's been ongoing data collection by USGS, OWRD, and Washington Department of Ecology, and that data includes groundwater levels, stream flow, geochemistry data, and this will all continue during the next 4 years of the study. We'll be describing the hydrogeologic framework, which includes characterizing hydrogeologic units, which are essentially geologic units that we group based on water-bearing characteristics or hydraulic properties. And those basically describe how the different units transmit water, so how fast water might move through the different aquifers or hydrogeologic units, and how much water can be stored within those units. And we'll also be creating water level maps as part of the hydrogeologic framework effort. Oh, go back, Harmony. We'll also be defining a hydrologic budget, and this includes groundwater use, both for irrigation water use and non-irrigation water use. We'll be estimating recharge, both natural and artificial groundwater recharge in the basin, and discharge within the basin as well, natural and pumping related discharge. And then we'll take all this information that we've gathered from the hydrogeologic framework, the water budget, and all the data collection that's been done within the basin, and that'll provide what we need to evaluate the full groundwater flow system. So with that information, we will be looking at groundwater level trends over time, flow directions between recharge and discharge points, the role of structure on groundwater flow directions, looking at geochemistry and age dating So this will provide us information to better understand how groundwater moves in the subsurface and how long it takes for water to move, say, from a recharge area to a discharge area. Does it take tens to hundreds of years, or does it take thousands of years to move between these different areas? And then we'll also be evaluating groundwater and surface water interactions to better understand the current issues related to in-stream flows and recharge. And then last, we'll be publishing peer-reviewed reports and data. And again, that'll all be publicly available. Next slide. And so last, I'll leave you with some frequently asked questions that we get, that we commonly get from the public. And those include, what's an aquifer? What are aquifer properties? How old is the groundwater within the system? And how much recharge is happening on either an annual or a multi-decade basis. So that's it. Thank you for coming to the meeting, and we appreciate all the interest.
But it was called to my attention in one of the rooms that it wasn't entirely clear, how this input was going to be used. And so I just want to clarify that. So right now the groundwater study is in a scoping phase. The USGS is working with cooperating agencies, Water Resources Department, and Ecology to define the scope of the study, and as well as the budget, the timeline. Amanda covered that, but the cooperating agencies are currently working through that. And the questions that you present today and the information that you present today will be considered by the cooperating agencies as they further refine the scoping document, which will then become the basis for a contract. But there's still a lot to be worked out even once the work plan is published. And I'll get into a little bit more about that later in the meeting. But essentially, you're helping to just provide inputs to the cooperating agencies as they further refine and agree on the scope of the groundwater study. So I'm going to call on, does someone remember if they're in room number 6? What did you hear in room number 6?
Yeah, that was my room. I think that the general, thought is, or it's agreed that there's some issues in the basin with usage and supply, and the general hope is that this study can inform decision making on how to better manage the resource and or supplement via different methods, whether it be ASR or other others. So yeah, basically inform the best moves, or the best next steps, should stay.
Thanks, Chris. How about room number 8?
I think that was me. This is Steve Gingrich with the USGS. We had a diverse group of questions, I think, which was interesting to see, from stream habitat, interested in looking at drawdown in specific parts of the aquifer and not in others. Questions about how the state's going to handle each state, kind of competing interest kind of things, and the big question of how much water is there till we run out. So it's kind of just covered the broad range of interests in the valley, or in the basin, that was pretty interesting to see. So hopefully we can address all these questions going forward. That's it.
Thanks, Steve. How about room number 11?
Was that us, Becky? I don't remember.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we had some really good inputs. It seemed like the underlying theme for most folks was a better understanding of the resource, the connection between the different aquifers, surface water resource, with the idea of supporting the existing agriculture, protecting the senior users while still trying to support the junior users as well, and with the overarching theme of like trying to avoid litigation, best management to avoid conflict and litigation in the future.
Thanks, Jonathan. We'll have one more from room 2.
That's me. Yeah. So yeah, some similar themes actually. Questions about how might we effectively recharge the aquifers, knowing that we're using a finite resource. Questions about defining the interconnectedness of the different aquifers. So understanding we've got these discrete systems, but we've also got this interplay between the systems and trying to better understand that. And then a question about, I think it was particular to Washington, how the water level trends are differing spatially across the basin. Are there areas where water levels are coming up? Are there areas where water levels are going down? So better filling some data gaps, I think. Is that, yeah.
Great. Thank you. So now I'm just gonna run through if I can get it to load, another quick little presentation and talk about so we have the science, the investigation, and then we have public participation. And one thing we're trying to figure out right now, in addition to what's the scope of the groundwater study, we're trying to figure out how to include you all as the study progresses. Oh, here it goes. So I'm just going to quickly run through what I mean by that before we open up the next prompt and I send you back to your breakout rooms. So we're borrowing from the International Association of Public Participation, their core values, and you can read them here. I won't read them to you. But essentially, I think we share a belief that that people need to be a part of the things that affect their lives, and that sustainable outcomes are more likely to happen when people are a part of the journey. And we need to help you understand what opportunities there are for you to participate, how you can effectively participate, make sure you have the information that you need, and then also be clear with you about how your input is used. Which gets to that really good question that was asked in breakout rooms of, why are you asking us this question? How will it be used? So public participation, we really want to offer opportunities that make sense for both the public and for the project. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about how we have to weigh these things. This particular project is focused on the scope, execution, and outputs from the scientific investigation. This is not a decision-making process about policy or management. This is purely about the scientific investigation. And any sort of policy making or management decision would have to have its own public participation process. And we would describe and define that in a different venue. We're just now in Oregon wrapping up the Harney Basin groundwater study, and this shows you just some photos of meetings and dinners that we had in the community there. And it's really important to us to make sure that the opportunities that we have reflect the needs and the interests of the community, and every single community is really different. So we're weighing a lot of these things, the number of participants. Walla clearly has a ton of people really interested and invested in this. There's a high level of interest and likely a desire to have an input to the groundwater study. And we're going to be weighing that against time, capacity, budget, because taking input and making good use of input, it does require people's time and energy. But we want to, try to find a balance there. We also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of other things going on in the basin, and so if we ask for you to participate, we don't want to burden you with process, and so we really want to figure out that sweet spot where you have opportunities to participate, but we're not burdening. So the public participation is, what's going to be what's going to be challenging about this is we're working across, 2 different states, multiple agencies, and all of our public participation activities are going to need to be pretty well coordinated. And so we're going to line out activities in a public participation plan, which describes the steps of the process and then the activities and communications that we expect at each one of those steps. And we need to have buy-off from all the cooperating agencies that they can actually participate in that way, and then get feedback from you all about, does that reflect how you would like to participate? So these are the 5 general steps, and essentially each of these steps will have corresponding activities describing how, how we would like to invite you to participate in the study. But we haven't defined these yet. So we're still looking for ideas for how to invite your participation. And that's something that the next prompt will really center around. So the goals here, we really believe that that involving you all in this process will produce, better results, and it will produce something that is useful and usable to you. We really want to make sure that we are building trust in the science, and we have a shared scientific foundation from which to build. And also make sure that anything that's produced here is able to integrate with all of the other work going on in the basin. So with that, we're gonna now open up the second prompt. And this prompt is really gonna help us figure out how to craft that public participation plan. So what are those activities associated with each of the steps in the groundwater study? All right, well, thanks everyone. I'm gonna call out some folks to give us a recap of what happened in your rooms. Let's hear from room 1.
Hank, do you want to go? Where's Hank?
Are we room 1?
We are room 1.
We talked, wrap it up, I'd say the common theme was that probably the most important thing that people were asking is they want to feel like they've really been heard and listened to. That's in their mind the end of a successful study, and all points of view and perspectives have been heard and truly listened to.
Also that people want to stay informed of what's going on with the study currently.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
How about room 4?
I think that might have been empty on this one.
Oh, you're right. You're totally right. How about 3?
Okay, that's me, Andy Long. Just had to unmute here. So yeah, our group had a similar theme. I think people will find it useful if we keep them updated and appraised of the situation and the progress of the study. Are we meeting milestones, or are our milestones timely as we meet them? And we're putting our data out there for people to see it as we go through the study as much as we can. And are we open and transparent when we give updates and appraisals of the study? And also, a couple of people commented on the possibility of having meeting overload and fatigue. So we want to be succinct and brief in our updates and get our message and our updates across efficiently and concisely.
Thanks, Andy. How about room number 9?
Yeah, that was my room. We had a good, I think, cross-section of the area. We had a manager from an irrigation district, a couple landowner farmers, and an engineer. So the questions were great. I think really, like Andy and Hank have mentioned, people want to be able to observe the process. So not just at the end, they want to see what's going on throughout. They want the process to be transparent. So we're not, as we get to different phases of the project, they want to be able to see what's been decided and, where we're at. Someone also mentioned that they want to believe and trust that the team is neutral, that the scientists are neutral in their positions. And the engineer had a good comment about really being clear up front when we do get to the modeling phase about assumptions that went into the model and limitations, so that everybody understands the study that we're doing and what it can actually answer, and making sure that that's not something that we wait 4 years from now to let people know, that people understand the limitations of what we're doing. So I think that summarizes.
Thanks, Wendy. And have we heard from anything from room 2?
That is me.
Oh, that's you. We heard from you last round.
You've heard from me.
Which rooms have we not heard from? Who have I not picked on? Melissa's room. And Joe's room. Okay, Melissa, then Joe.
So room 12, very kind of similar thoughts. We had a room full of scientists. So hearing that we need to be adaptable and flexible if things change. Definitely want to be unbiased to create the trust. We just heard that from Wendy. And being able to share out information along the way, not just at the end, and making those clear connections as phases are moving forward. And I think number 1 is being able to communicate at lots of different levels. So communicating with forums like this, communicating highly technical information at a user level, and just staying connected and using some of those local sources to help liaison between whether it's the USGS, the state entities, and the locals.
Thanks, Melissa. How about you, Joe?
We had a really good cross-section of stakeholders. Let me know if my audio is going haywire again, please.
Nope.
We had a public utility manager, representative from Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and then some agricultural owners as well. So it's a good cross-section. This last session, I think data would be the central theme that we talked about. A great perspective was addressing the data first and the politics later. I think and we're well set up for that, I think. And it's a good goal to keep in mind throughout this. And that also that the data will be trusted and vetted, and also sufficient to make conclusions at the end of the study. And then kind of a final thought was, as the study winds down, hoping for a clear basis for an action plan, that steps are, it's apparent what steps are needed once the study has wrapped up.
Thanks, Joe. Were there any other rooms that we didn't hear from in either 1 or 2? Okay, go ahead, Amanda. Try to queue up last little dictation.
Unmute myself. Yeah, so we had a great participation. We started off with 3 people in the first breakout room, and then we ended up with 2 in the second. Had some great discussions. Similar theme, as other folks are mentioning. Folks want to have lots of public participation or opportunities to participate, but they don't need meetings happening all the time. Like certain milestones, I think they agreed that they would like to be updated so they can still provide input but not derail the train as we're moving along. And also a couple of other points were to make sure that we took into account the full inventory of groundwater inputs and outputs. So we made sure to recognize all the different contributions to the groundwater budget. And then also to make sure that we utilized previous studies and the data that's been collected there, because there's been a lot of effort to collect data and do different models and studies within different parts of the basin. So folks would really like to see all of that come together in the next study to get a holistic view of the basin.
Thanks, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
Did we get to all the rooms? Have we heard from all the rooms?
Room 11.
Room 10.
Wow. Okay, room 11 and 10, but you have to be very quick because you only get 1 minute.
Room 11, same type of themes, interest in making sure that the public was aware of our data collection efforts, that we give equal weighting somehow to those folks that don't have the resources to collect a lot of data versus those that have a lot of resources to collect data, that we somehow weight those equally. That the analysis and data resolve data gaps as opposed to creating more, and that the analysis is sufficient to support decision making for the future economy. So really good, thoughtful impact and really good, thoughtful input from the group.
Thanks, Jonathan. Justin.
All right, I'll defer to Patrick if he's available.
Yep, I'm back. Sorry, I got kicked off about halfway through our breakout session, but I'm back. We had a lot of the same themes that have already been expressed. Incremental updates throughout the process at a level that makes sense, and not just for the scientists, but for all of the stakeholders, so that everyone has a chance to digest what the goals are and how the objectives are being worked towards. And also multiple opportunities kind of on-ramp people throughout the process, so people have a chance to get caught up if they miss something along the way. There are opportunities to get back involved again. And then accessible data at the end of it, data that's usable for other scientists, and so that others can replicate and what's been done and use data for their own purposes.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to close this out with one quick slide on next steps. Are you guys able to see this slide? So the cooperating agencies, USGS, OWRD, and Washington Ecology are working together to refine the work plan, and we'll also be working to draft a public participation plan. Through the end of this year, they're going to be working on that work plan and agreeing on the scope of the study, which will kind of set the timeline, roles, deliverables, and budget. And that final plan of study is expected in early 2021, along with a draft public participation plan. And there will be an opportunity to provide feedback on both. The plan of study will be in its final form, so there will be no wordsmithing. It won't be any comments. The lights just went out. There won't be any comments on the text itself, but the study team is interested in receiving feedback. The public participation plan will be in draft form, and we can revise that as we get feedback to make sure that it captures kind of how you want to be involved. And then all of that will kind of inform the budget, the schedule. We kind of have to weigh all this out, and it will set us in motion for the next 4 years. After this meeting, there will be a recording of this available probably in about a week or so, and we'll also put together a quick little survey that you can, with these same questions and a couple other questions that you can fill out, you can send to people who weren't able to attend the meeting. And we're going to take all of that information into these scoping meetings between the cooperating agencies. So be on the lookout for an email, and then we're going to start trying to figure out what kind of regular updates we can provide to you, because there has been some data collection already in in the past year or so. So we want to give you an update on the things that have already occurred. I'd love to just quickly invite Chris Coates, if you're on the line, to just offer some closing remarks, and then we'll close out the meeting.
Off mute. Can you hear me okay? Okay, yeah, I just will be brief and reiterate what folks who presented earlier in the meeting hit on, which is, thank you for everybody's time. I know it's difficult to carve out time these days with everything that's going on, especially these days. So very much appreciate your time and input tonight. The only thing that I would just want to a shout out to our counterparts up in Washington. One thing that I heard a lot when I took this job a little over a year ago now was there was concern about coordination between the states, and if Oregon does something, is Washington going to do the same thing, or what's going on across the border? And I just wanted to take a second to shout out to Melissa and the other OCR staff that we work with, and then staff in the Water Resource Program in Spokane and Olympia. In this effort and many other efforts, I just want the stakeholders in the basin to know that the states are working together to the extent that we can, and we're working on make sure that we're coordinated and communicating. So if there's any questions that anybody has, that I can be helpful on, both in the regard of the basin study or other water management questions that you have in the basin, how we're working with Washington, anything that crosses your mind, feel free to reach out. And if I can't answer it, I'll get you in touch with the person who can. So just in closing, thanks again for your time, and we'll see you one day in person, but probably next time we'll still be on our favorite Zoom platform.